Hi, everyone. We have got a new book to launch, and this is from Kirsten Brumby. Welcome.
Hi, Susan. Very good to be here.
Fantastic. Well, listen up because we've got a great book here called I'm All Here. And we're going to talk with Kirsten today about what's this all about. And I know that this is for so many people, but it is a practical guide to courage, to humanity, and leading with our whole selves, which I absolutely love. So, Kirsten, I'd love to understand a little bit more that I know that you put so much in this book, but can you give
Yeah,
us a quick overview of what it means to be all here in our
yeah,
work lives?
yeah. Yep, sure. It's quite simple, really, or it sounds simple. Being all here in your work life simply means bringing the whole of who you are as a person, as a human, to your work. But what usually happens in our work lives is that we're too often encouraged or sometimes even forced to leave some of what makes us human at the door every morning when we walk in the door. So we are much more than just our mind, our thoughts, and our ability to do things, our competencies and skills and knowledge. We are mind, but we're also heart, body, and spirit, which means that quite often we leave those things at the door. We suppress our emotions to seem professional. We silence our opinions that don't fit the culture at the time. We override our values and our gut instincts to meet other people's expectations. So we basically turn up as carefully edited versions of ourselves. Being all here in the workplace actually means the opposite of that. It means knowing yourself deeply enough across all of those four elements that make you a human, that is mind, heart, body, and spirit, and so that you can make conscious choices about how you show up rather than just defaulting to whatever the role or the culture seems to require at the time.
You're absolutely right. Being with AI now, I think that we're going to be more of an asset to a company when we are all there. We bring our whole selves and our creativity and our ideas. So you're absolutely right there. And you actually write in the book that many professionals aren't tired from their jobs, but from the compounding exhaustion of pretending. What's the hidden cost of leaving our humanity at the door every morning and just showing up as we're meant to show up without being our whole selves?
The short answer is that the cost is actually enormous, and it's not so hidden when you know what you're looking for. The cost operates on multiple levels simultaneously. One is the personal cost, and the other one is to the organisation and to companies that we're working in, because organisations are just made up of a whole stack of people. So in personally, it's the cost is in the form of exhaustion and disconnection in people. Organisationally as well, you get disengagement, poor decisions and cultures where people just turn up for work and do their tasks rather than fully contributing. So at the individual level, if we look at both of those, the first level is the individual, the person, and the cost is the energy drain of maintaining that edited version of yourself that we talked about before. It takes energy. It takes energy to monitor what you're saying, suppressing what you feel, overriding what you actually think and believe. All of that takes cognitive and emotional energy. And that energy is not available for your work, your relationships, or your life outside of work. The organisational cost is just as significant. When people can't bring their whole selves to work, you lose access to their best thinking, genuine creativity, and their real judgment, what they really believe and think and judge decision making to be a good thing. You get compliance instead of commitment, and you get people who do what's expected rather than what's needed. You
Yeah,
get lead.
absolutely. And you
Mm.
miss that. You miss that person that may have something that could make a profound difference to the organization, but because they're coming and they're depleted of energy and they're not going to, they're just doing their jobs, which means organizations aren't getting the best out of
Yep.
their workers. Absolutely. You're right. And if someone is completely feels invisible in their current role and they are in that absolutely just really
Mm.
showing up like a robot. Absolutely. What's the first thing that they can do to start taking their power back?
The first thing, the very first thing before any action, before any conversations, before any decisions about whether to stay or leave an organisation because you don't feel like you fit there anymore, is to get curious about yourself. not about the organisation, not about whether your manager's a good manager or not, and not about what needs to change out there, but about you. Because what I've found, both in my own experience and in working with many leaders, is that the feeling of invisibility at work is almost always connected to a lack of clarity about who I actually am. What are my values? What genuinely drives me to what I need to feel seen and valued? So that first act of taking your power back is a deeply internal one. It's asking yourself, what parts of me have I been hiding? Why have I been doing that? And what has it actually cost me? What's my personal cost? Because when you get clear on that gap of what you haven't been bringing to work, you can start to close it. Not all at once, not in ways that feel unsafe, but in small, deliberate experiments that we talk about in the book. Maybe it's sharing an opinion you don't normally keep to yourself. Maybe it's naming a value that matters to you in a team meeting. Maybe it's simply stopping performing a role that was never really you. And none of that requires permission from your organisation or your manager. It all starts with you.
I love that. There's going to be some such clarity and awakenings for individuals that are reading this book, and even leaders and organizations. What does it look like for a workplace that feels like when everyone is bringing their whole selves to work? What does that feel like and look like for an organization?
I just got goosebumps when you asked me that question. The big thing I usually notice is that the energy is different. There's just something about team meetings and workplace events, even feeling in the feeling and the energy in the lunchroom, and even on virtual meetings, it's different. Things feel more real, and that's not just in positive situations when things are going well. People can disagree constructively because they're speaking from their actual perspective and are able to say the truth, their perspective, rather than what's expected of them. Decisions are better because they're informed by the full range of what people think and know and feel. And there's a quality of genuine connection between people, not the surface level getting on and being civil, but the kind of trust that comes from actually knowing and being known by the people you work with. It's the difference between a group of people who work in the same place and a team that actually functions as one. At the organisational level, you see it in the numbers too. It's clear. I've certainly seen it many times in my clients and also in my own experience, not always in ways that are immediately obvious. You can see it in retention because people don't leave organisations where they feel genuinely seen and valued. You see it in innovation because creativity requires psychological safety, requires people to feel that they can bring their whole selves, including their crazy way out ideas, without being penalised. And most importantly, you see it in leadership quality.
And I think that, like you said, you're seeing in the leaders, seeing in it, if we're working in a happy workplace, people talk about having a happy workplace. It always comes, like you said, at the bottom line, and everyone's happy to be there. But it really does start with really reading parts of this book where we take our own responsibility to be all there, and that's where things can change. And speaking up, and organizations can also look at this as some ways that they can change things so that people can show up to be whole there. If a reader, no matter who that is, and I'm sure that, like I said, it's an individual, an organization, leaders, so many different people can get a lot from this book. But if a reader only took one truth from the book, what would, I know there's many in there, but what's one that we can have as a standout for the people today to know?
One truth. Okay. It would have to be, and it's kind of got two parts, I think. The first part is that the exhaustion that you feel, if you're feeling really tired, and that bone weary tiredness that we sometimes get, and I see so often, it's not necessarily a sign that something's wrong with you or that you're necessarily in burnout. It's often a sign that you're working against yourself and hiding parts of yourself, as we've been talking about and as the book talks about quite a lot. And the second part of that is that, to that truth, is that there's actually another way to be. There's another way to work. So many people, of the people that I work with and the people that I wrote this book for, have been wondering sometimes for years, if they're too sensitive, if they're too much, if they're not quite right for the environments they're in. And they've blamed themselves for that gap between who they are and how they show up at work, that they're not showing themselves and they're not able to share their emotions or bring in their gut instinct or whatever it is that they're hiding. So the single most important thing that I think that I would love a reader who gets through the book and puts down the book at the end knows that the gap isn't a personal failing. This is what happens when we've learned, as most of us have, to edit ourselves down to what seems acceptable and professional. It's not a character flaw. It's actually a very human response to systems that weren't designed for us. They weren't designed for people, and certainly not whole people, the whole of a human. So the second part of that belief is that coming back to yourself is possible. It's not a dramatic transformation. It doesn't have to be a sudden personality overhaul. But as we talk about in the book, a gradual, practical, deeply human process of remembering who you actually are and finding the courage to bring more of that to your work. And that's what, in the book, the 4 steps are designed to do. You don't need to fix yourself or do better or be better. You just need to come home to yourself, come home to yourself, and this book is the map for getting there.
I absolutely love that. I'm all here, a practical guide to courage, humanity, and leading with your whole self. Kirsten, thank you so much. The links will be below for people to be able to grab a copy. I think what's so important is we can make these dramatic changes of thinking and leaving a job and all these things. What I think is this is really a practical guide for people to start. If things aren't right, this is where they can start reading and coming back to their whole selves. Thank you so much for sharing all your knowledge, allowing Dean Publishing to get your message out there. It's a great book that I know so many people are going to get some great transformations out of, as well as organizations. Thank you, Kirsten, so much.
Thank you, Susan, and thank you also to the team at Dean Publishing, not just for today, but for helping bringing this book to life. Thank you very much.
Beautiful. Our pleasure. So grab it, link below. Thank you.
Thank you.